Unfortunately, it's gotten so bad they may not even need to enforce it by law. You don't need Tipper Gore anymore when you've got local religious right vigilantes like the woman who got the Washington anti-erotic music bill passed. They get plenty of how-to advice from Tipper Gore's book, and also through the extensive religious right computer mailing lists, the most organized in this country. You get on Robertson's mailing list, you're going to get on some more, and in addition to telling you how to attack gay people through the ballot box and how to go after your local school boards, they tell you how to pick on live music venues and record stores as well.
On top of it, it's even trickled down to the point where they finally did their first criminal conviction of a fanzine, an underground zine in Florida. A cartoonist named Michael Diana, who did a magazine called Boiled Angel, which had a lot of graphic depictions of child abuse and various different sex acts and things. He was put on trial in his home area of Pinellas County, Florida, and over a zine that had 300 subscribers, he got 3 years probation, $3,000 fine, 1,248 hours of community service, and a judge ordering him not to publish or even create privately any more drawings that might be deemed obscene. His probation officer can enter his home without a warrant at any time to make sure he's not drawing anything that judge might not like in his private bedroom. And he's to have no contact with anybody under the age of 18, even though he works in a convenience store for a living.
And with Mr. Bill even coming out and saying he wants a rating system for records, who needs Tipper Gore? On top of it, as I think I said before, the state of Washington now has yet another bill in its legislature to restrict so-called erotic music, whatever that means. There's been bills all over the country introduced in state legislatures calling for classifying that Tipper sticker, the explicit lyrics parental advisory black hand that a lot of artists find on their records against their will now, classifying that as a legal definition of obscenity where you can get busted if you sell that to somebody under 18. One that was introduced in Texas even wanted to jail people who sold a Tipper stickered album to somebody at any age. And also prosecute stores for selling an album that some local Bible thumper sheriff thinks should have had a Tipper sticker on it. I, on the other hand, put my own records out so that I don't have anybody telling me what kind of lyrics I can use or putting Tipper stickers on my album. But what am I going to do if some of these laws pass, especially at the federal level, where I either start Tipper stickering my records and put myself out of business that way, or get put out of business for not putting Tipper stickers on records? This could just bulldoze or steamroll under a lot of the independent music scene a lot of us are so fond of today. Susan Baker, one of Tipper Gore's co-founders in the PMRC, who until recently sat on the board of directors of Focus on the Family, another major religious right vigilante group, even said what we really have to go after is the independents. And on top of that, a lot of the chain stores in this country won't even carry any record with a Tipper sticker on it, which of course costs a lot of records thousands and thousands of sales. It's a myth that putting a parental advisory blurb on a record is going to sell more copies. It doesn't. It means that you can't get into a majority of the stores in America. A majority of people in this country, unfortunately, do buy their music from these chain stores that mostly will only have top 40 in it and grudgingly let in a little bit of metal and Pearl Jam for the young'uns who won't buy Garth Brooks or something. Consequently, there's a lot of in-house pressure on major labels to wash artists' mouth out with religious right soap. Ice-T, they just simply booted out of the system. The pressure even came down to where, I hate to pick on them at a time like this, but Nirvana caved in, and now Geffen is changing the back cover to In Utero and changing the title of Rape Me to Waif Me, whatever that means, just to get Walmart, and Kmart to stock the record. The press release said, well, that since that was the only places you could buy records in a little town like Aberdeen, we sympathize with the fans and we want to get the record out to as many people as possible. But what kind of a message does that send if that's what gets done to the record? At least Two Live Crew has as nasty as they want to be and as clean as they want to be for two different albums. The censored version is a clean one, and they flaunt it so people know that censorship is going on. I actually got one of the clean ones from Luther Campbell after the Donahue show and had Donahue autograph it for me. He came up to me afterwards, "Where's Jello Biafra? Do you know where Jello is?" "Right here." "Really? Where is he?" And then later, "I want you with me on this. We have to all stick together to fight these people." And never heard from him again. But anyway, Geffen Records has already done this to another artist now. You know, now that Nirvana opened the floodgates by caving in, they did it to the Beck Mellow Gold album, where every four-letter word on the record has been electronically altered for Kmart and Walmart customers at least, and I don't know whether that's going to be just a separate edition or not. They could at least put something on the cover saying Special Kmart and Walmart Edition, where you could then bring it home and open it up and have a mile-long list of reasons fold out of why you should boycott Walmart. I mean, Walmart, behind their folksy image and down-home advertising, is a systematic predatory corporation that's been destroying the economies of one small town after another in this country. It's well documented that when Walmart comes to town, of course their prices are lower and they also drive wages down. And if the little mom and pop stores that have been struggling to compete in an age of strip malls, often as not they cave in, so the only place you can buy anything is at Walmart. And well, maybe if your business collapsed, maybe the wife could ring the cash register at Walmart for minimum wage, but basically, a lot of your reasons for living in a small town are gone. It's a feudalistic system where you're all peasants and then you got to go to the Baron High castles. What was that? Walmart's gotten into Canada. They're moving into Mexico big time, too. NAFTA's not going to do Mexico a lot of good either. Wages have already been cut in half in Mexico in the past few years. Now they're just going to put the screws on further. Some Mexicans reacted against NAFTA through the rebellion in the Chiapas state. The Clinton administration's response was to increase military aid to Mexico. Back to Walmart. Walmart was run until his death by Sam Walton, who by underpaying all these people and ripping everybody off, he became the richest man in the history of the world. He died with more money even than the Sultan of Brunei or any of the oil sheiks or anything. And he was also religious right. Jimmy Swaggart, his buddy, once told him to kick all rock magazines out of Walmart, and he did, including Tiger Beat. Walmart hardly stocks any metal or any rap. And so if you are isolated in one of these towns and they have their way, oh, you really want to get down and rock and roll, huh? How about some Garth or some Travis Tritt here or something like that?
Did anybody know that until Clinton ran for president, Hillary Clinton was on Walmart's board of directors? Yeah.
And if you like Walmart, you'll love Blockbuster Video. Another one of the most predatory creatures in the dumbing down of our entertainment world, again owned and operated by a religious right sympathizer and major contributor to the Republican Party named H. Wayne Huizenga, who got his money to start Blockbuster by selling off his old company, Waste Management Incorporated, one of the most notorious toxic waste dumpers in the world. And he's so conservative that no NC-17 movie, the modern X rating, gets into any Blockbuster outlet. Any European film that's unrated that might have a square inch of breast for a split second can't have that in Blockbuster. but they're happy to rent Dirty Harry and Rambo to 5-year-old kids. Just like Walmart might not want to sell you a metal album that would make you want to kill yourself, but they're happy to sell you a gun. Family values, American style, once again. Blockbuster has also gobbled up a couple of music store chains. Sound Warehouse and Music Plus are now owned by Blockbuster. And a former employee of one of those stores in Austin, Texas, told me that when the Blockbuster people moved in, they not only kicked out all the Playboy videos, they kicked out metal and rap as well. And most so-called alternative, except for something like Pearl Jam, which they had to carry at the time, or something like that. Otherwise, that was all kicked out. And Blockbuster has gotten so powerful and so big, according to the San Francisco Chronicle, last year they made more money than their top 375 competitors combined. And Hollywood is taking notice. According to the SF Weekly, they now screen their movies in advance for Blockbuster representatives who suggest that they might not want to stock it because of this or that. They then cut that out of the movie before we get to see the movie in theaters. So Blockbuster has an unseen hand in censoring the films even before we can see them in theaters. And they also went in, or Huizenga went in with Viacom when they gobbled up Paramount Pictures in yet another hostile takeover. His reward was a vice president's chair inside Viacom. Viacom owns MTV. If Huizenga gets to start messing with MTV, expect the content to water down and change. Not only would the bands get a lot wimpier, even than MTV often has now, but what do you want to bet Beavis and Butthead would be born again and be hawking Bibles next season? Meanwhile, the religious right is working hard to spread themselves and make themselves more powerful behind the scenes since they no longer have anybody sympathetic to them up top. Contributions have gone way up since Bush lost the '92 election. They were especially effective at using Clinton's proposed lifting the ban of gay people serving in the military as a way to raise contributions. Jerry Falwell's talking about getting back into it and reforming the moral majority. The people who inherited his clout and mailing us and financial base when he went back to preaching, supposedly Focus on the Family, based in Colorado Springs, they're getting more money and more powerful than ever before. Focus on the Family helped engineer the Anti-Gay Rights Amendment that passed in the state of Colorado. And Pat Robertson's Christian Coalition helped organize the Oregon Citizens Alliance and coordinate their anti-gay campaign last time. Even if the law doesn't pass, it does a lot of damage to the people in the community. The teen suicide rates have gone up in those areas. In Oregon, 2 lesbians were burned to death in an apartment building that was firebombed, and then the Christians came out to heckle the mourners later on. It brings out the viciousness and the bigotry in people and just keeps stoking the fire and stoking the fire. In Washington, they're trying to do the same thing now. The religious right has 2 anti-gay initiatives coming up in November designed to do what the Colorado laws and the Oregon laws did. In the case of the Colorado law, they just framed it in TV ads as, these people want special rights. It's not a special right to be able to live in your own apartment without getting firebombed, for crying out loud. Or getting jumped and beat up on the way home from school, or being forbidden to teach school because of what you do in your private life. One of these Washington initiatives even calls for taking away children of gay and lesbian parents. The Oregon one called for firing all teachers suspected of being homosexual and requiring schools to teach that homosexuality was bad and mandating discrimination against gays when it came to housing. And they're trying to do this all over the country based on the Colorado law, since the Oregon one was deemed a little too volatile in the end when it barely lost. And they also are slowly but surely trying to gut the school curriculum in this country in two different ways. One of them is called school vouchers. A ballot initiative was up last time in California for this, where if it passed, somebody who wanted to send their kid to a religious school or a private school instead of a public school could use public school money to pay the tuition in the form of a voucher. So all our taxes would have wound up helping finance religious schools and things. Thankfully, in that case, the voucher initiative lost by about 65-35. Even in Orange County, it lost badly. So that was some hope, but they're going to try again. But their more effective tactic is running what Pat Robertson comes right out and calls stealth candidates. The way a stealth candidate works is they pick an office, everything from state representative to school board, city council, county clerk or something, and they don't even tell the regular people in the community that they're running. They don't show up at all candidates' meetings. They'll just put flyers under windshield wipers in front of churches and tap into those religious right mailing lists to contact other like-minded bigots and raise some cash from Pat Robertson. Ironically, Pat Robertson gets all this money tax-free, claiming it's just a religious organization. And there are federal laws forbidding tax-deductible money to be used for direct political activity. Clinton could shut him down with a snap of a finger, and he won't do it. So Robertson takes in at least $200 million a year and disperses it partly to so-called stealth candidates. So then, sometimes, the election comes around, the stealth candidates wind up winning. In San Diego County, over half of them won. In the Vista, California school board, they got a majority first time out and immediately imposed teaching of biblical theory of evolution, not in science classes because the Supreme Court wouldn't let them, but instead they've put it in history and literature classes. They're mandating that everybody say Christian prayers before class begins, which must make it real interesting to be an atheist, a Muslim, or a Jew down there. Then another school board next door to them canceled a free breakfast for poor kids program on the grounds that it was interfering with family matters. And another school board in Central Florida canceled Head Start altogether because all these kids should be home with their mothers. So this is where it's real important to pay attention and register and vote. Even if you only wind up with, change of figureheads at the top from a George Bush to a yuppie George Bush, the local elections are where the action is. Because when only 13% to 15% of people vote, in school board elections, 8% of registered voters can win you the election. And one of the things the religious right likes to do on school boards, by the way, is get rid of all AIDS education whatsoever, because abstinence is best. Realistic people, in other words. My sister works at the state library in Colorado, and she tells me that religious right attacks on libraries and school books have skyrocketed since Amendment 2 in Colorado went through. Now they have the how-to guides coming to them from Pat Robertson and from Focus on the Family, located in Colorado Springs. They, of course, are running a lot of people for public office as well. Meanwhile, with gang and crime hysteria, the school board in Boca Raton, Florida, banned NFL baseball hats. Even for the Miami Dolphins, saying, "We don't seem to have a gang problem here yet, but we don't want one to start." Pete Wilson, the governor of California, who's also not only trying to do 3 strikes you're out, but 1 strike you're out for first-time rape convictions, life in prison with no possibility of parole, he has also proposed a law banning baggy clothes. He wore baggy Elvis pants when he was a teenager, but now if somebody wears those or hip-hop clothes, it must be used to carry a gun, therefore we have to ban it. The religious right is even out to gut environmentalists now. There's an organization, I can't remember the name of it, it's based up in Washington, and it's part of what's called the so-called wise use movement. The idea that wise use is strip mines, logging, theme parks in national parks, and we have to use up all our resources now because Jesus is coming back soon anyway, and he's going to plant all the trees back again. Things like that. People bankrolling the wise use groups include Sun Myung Moon's Unification Church, Pat Robertson, Jesse Helms is even involved in this, James Watt, Reagan's old Interior Secretary, the one who proposed oil and coal mining leases in national parks and things like that. He incidentally was a protege of Joseph Coors. He said recently, to solve the environmentalist problem, if the ballot box or the jury box fails, perhaps the cartridge box should be used. And this was Watt saying things like this. You know, that was made at open season on people like Judy Berry and Daryl Cherney of Earth First, who had a car bomb go off in their car and it maimed Judy pretty badly. Women in both Florida and Cincinnati had their throats slashed. There's been a lot of violent attacks behind the scenes on environmentalists, and the wise use people, including Watt, have been condoning this. Just one more area of how they can try and take over the country. And as I was saying before about true believers, there are a lot of them. A large majority in a poll taken in this country said they considered themselves born again. That scares me. And what does born again mean to some of these people? Many of them subscribe to this theory called Reconstructionism or Kingdom of Dominion. There's an organization called Coalition on Revival working specifically for this, where they believe that Jesus is not going to come back to earth and make everything well again until we install a worldwide theocratic dictatorship, fundamentalist Christian dictatorship based on Old Testament law. Kind of like they have in Iran, where clerics decide all the laws and who gets their hands chopped off and who lives and who dies. And, you know, women get razor blades in their lips for wearing lipstick and things like that. What they want is Old Testament law, which mandates executions for witchcraft, executions for heresy, executions of gay people. Some of them even want executions of unruly children, even though they also want to execute abortion doctors and any woman who has an abortion. Reverend Donald Wildman, who I haven't talked about much tonight, but he's one of the most powerful religious rights censors in the country. He's from the American Family Association, and another group of his is called Clear TV. And he got CBS to kick Mighty Mouse off the air because he sniffed a bouquet of flowers and the petals went up his nose, therefore he was pushing drugs on small children. But he's got power. They did what he wanted. He's gotten every car manufacturer to pull their ads out of Playboy. He got Pepsi to cancel an ad campaign featuring Madonna they'd spent millions making, but they never showed it because Reverend Wildman didn't like Madonna. This guy's got a lot of power. And he also is connected with the Coalition on Revival. And Pat Robertson has endorsed Reconstructionism, and so has Jerry Falwell. This is what their end goal is. It doesn't just stop with Beverly LaHaye of Concerned Women for America and Robert Simmons for Citizens of Excellence in Education saying things like, we look forward to the time when there are no more public schools. They want everything. And they feel deep down inside that they're doing us all a favor this way. In their heart of hearts, they feel they're doing the right thing. It's very important to understand this about them, that a lot of them really feel like they mean well when they try to shut down abortion clinics or protect their innocent little ones from wicked satanic homosexuals and things like that. They may be hard to reach, but it's very important to try and reach the people that might fall for this otherwise. They're more tenacious than we are. They're better organized. They sure as hell ain't going to divide themselves up into little warring camps saying, I'm not going to work with you or support you because you aren't a vegetarian, or I'm not going to allow you to be mentioned in my magazine because I don't think you're punk, or something like that, which... It's far more important to argue over whether neurosis is more punk than screeching weasel than it is to fight the fascist and religious right. This is why we never get anywhere, is mentality like this. I, on the other hand, got a good close-up whiff of just how tenacious they feel in their heart of hearts and just how organized they are when I was flown out to, of all things, the National Religious Broadcasters Convention in Washington, D.C. This is a major meeting where they all powwow. For any of you who've been to these music conventions like New Music Seminar, South by Southwest, this was a religious right version of the New Music Seminar. And everybody was hawking their wares, networking. Jerry Falwell was there. Swaggart's people were there. I got to see a press conference where a PTL club representative defended the integrity of Jim and Tammy Baker. Reagan was even there to greet the constituency and whatnot. He was in this big auditorium where first they awarded Nancy Reagan Grandmother of the Year. Then out doddered Reagan from behind the platform. He literally was just aimlessly being guided by people who were bouncing him back and forth gently in the palms of their hands. Falwell was sitting there on the stage, noticeably not clapping for Reagan like the others were. Sam Donaldson standing off in the corner, nodding with his puffin-like profile as Reagan pleaded for more aid to the Contras, right? And then the House voted him down the same day. What really struck me was how much makeup Reagan had on. He had on more makeup than Nancy. You could stick a nickel in the amount of powder and cake he had up there. He even had rosy cheeks made out of rouge. I thought, my God, here's 1,000 or 2,000 the most rabid, powerful homophobes in this country, and none of them are saying boo at the drag queen in their midst. The real fun was on the convention floor. I'd been brought out here by a radio evangelist snake oil salesman named Bob Larson, who's written several anti-rock books. He even claims Stevie Nicks, Stevie Wonder, Springsteen, and John Denver are Satanists. And there we were, me and Bob Guccione Jr. from Spin once again. The PMRC was invited to send a representative, but now they won't even meet either of us in the ring on a religious rights show. Once again, when I got there, I dressed the part. I decided to look like an evangelist or something in order to mingle better and all that, plus come across less menacing to people who were menaced by my very existence. I didn't tell any of them that if my parents had aborted me, they might not have had to worry about this, but... Anyway, Larson is out there, and he is such a blatant con man, he even got caught red-handed after Oral Roberts was threatening to die unless he got $8 million. Larson was then caught laying the groundwork to fake a catastrophic illness to raise contributions, according to Westward Magazine in Denver. Anyway, down on the convention floor, we're on this platform only about the size of a couple cafeteria tables with all these other conventioneers all standing right up against us 2 or 3 feet from our eyes, just glaring at us. As we sat there while Bob Larson stood in front of a big television screen, announced he was going to show a terrible Billy Idol video that had lesbian sex in it. And when it got to the point it had lesbian sex, or so he thought, he cut the video, saying he wouldn't want to offend anybody's family values, and also that would mean he wouldn't have to prove there was lesbian sex in the video. His lack of research was amazing. It was his reckless lack of research was amazing. Bob Guccione Jr., a devout Catholic, caught him quoting the Bible wrong on his own show. Every single commercial during his show, which was a live broadcast from the convention floor, was for Bob Larson. And when he got to me, he said, well, aren't you a Pied Piper leading people to hell? Isn't that what that song Hell Nation is about? I was saying, no, I didn't even write that song. Our drummer wrote that song about growing up black in St. Louis. Then eventually the audience jumped in. Cops for Christ from Brooklyn was especially vocal. You guys should get down with us in the trenches. You should ride the subways and see what it's really like and see why these people need to be brought to Jesus. And afterwards, I did get to chat with some of the people who'd been glaring at me. Once again, I dressed the part with a pinstripe suit and slicked my hair back evangelist style and all. I did have to wade through a little bit of muck to try and communicate with them. A lot of, I didn't realize musicians could be intelligent sort of remarks. Some of them I was able to see why they felt they were doing right and try and get through to them why we felt I was doing right and maybe we could live in the same world if one didn't try to force their point of view on the other by fucking with the laws and stuff like that. And some of them were actually open to that. Others, however, come up to me, oh, I saw you on the Larson show. Stare, stare. You have such nice eyes. Stare, stare. But I know there's something missing in your life. I can tell there's something lacking back there. Bye, I'd say. Then the next day, I discovered my pass was still good and I could go and crash the convention again and mingle with them this time. I stole some videos from Pat Robertson, got some big stack of shopping bags from Heritage USA, got some Christian cartoon show videos, which Hanna-Barbera makes, among others. I ran into one guy who handed me a little card. Hi, I'm from the Cult Awareness Network. You know, they're a group that deprograms, quote unquote, people if they can snatch them back out of the Moonies or Children of God or David Koresh or whatever. You know, controversial organization for their tactics. But anyway, said, you know, there's some people in here who have their tables set up who are just as much of a cult as the Moonies or Manson or something. They're that one, that one, that one, that one, that one. If you really want to get some good stuff, go there. I think I will. First, I turned around and saw a booth set up trying to raise money and interest some backers in Christian cinema. A new frontier here, Christian cinema. There are some videos for sale in Focus on the Family's magazine. I don't want to give $20 to Focus on the Family to find out, but I'm wondering how they could make a whole feature-length film on somebody who decided to quit his job and buy a bus for Christ and drive it around. Most of the booths on the convention floor was divided about half and half, religion for profit people and satellite equipment salesmen. But at the Christian cinema booth, the only Hollywood star they could get to go to bat for them was Richard Kiel, the one who plays Jaws in the James Bond movies. So there were some preprint autograph photos of Richard Kiel with those Jaws teeth on, grinning at you, God bless you, Richard Kiel, with a biblical verse. And the movie they were trying to raise the money to make would star Richard Kiel as a Bigfoot monster who attacked a Montana town and then found Jesus. I almost wish they could raise the money so I could direct it. So then I moseyed down the aisle and looked at some other stuff and wound up at one of the booths pointed out to me by the Cult Awareness Network guy, Maranatha Campus Ministries. I don't know whether you've seen them up here or not, but I saw a display for them in University of South Florida and Tampa. They were advertising live Jim Morrison footage. Come see, lost concert footage of the Doors. But once they got you in, it was Jim Morrison worships the devil, Motley Crue worships the devil, Dead Kennedys, worships the devil. We were in their video too. So I finally got one from the guy, realizing who they were. This weird younger guy with a Naugahyde plaid jacket that was definitely not from a thrift store, and rubber bands and wires all over the inside of his mouth and stuff. That glazed look in his eye of the true believer and the absolute follower. You've all seen that one before, I'm sure. Anyway, say, hey, thanks for the video. I'm in it. But then I couldn't get away because this other woman came out from maybe from that booth or another one. This older, short, tank-like woman with gap teeth grabs me in a wrestling hold or something. I couldn't get away from her. She was strong as a linebacker. You know, you have such nice eyes. But I can tell there's something missing in your life. Come on, we're both gonna pray right now. Come on, we're gonna pray. Oh Lord, please give my company the book rights when he converts. Religious right on parade for you in America today. But as I said before, they are slowly but surely amassing power at the local levels behind the scenes. Meanwhile, the NAFTA treaty is through as a way of gutting environmental laws and labor safety and whatnot. American police forces continue to act more and more like Latin American death squads, with the drug war being an excuse. Clinton wants to build more and more prisons. He doesn't seem to want to call a halt to that. So, with all this going on, welcome to New World Order Light. Good night. Buy my soda, said the moose diarrhea salesman. And we did. We all did. But when we brought it home and opened it, it was not what we thought we were getting. And instead of searching for something better, we settle for searching for another moose diarrhea salesman. I remember how disappointed I was when my family brought home our first TV. It wasn't because it was black and white, but when you turned the TV on, President Kennedy wasn't on the screen. See, when we first went to the store to buy the TV, President Kennedy was there, in color, row after row of his head, all the way up to the ceiling. Look, Eric, it's President Kennedy. See, it's President Kennedy. Hi, President Kennedy. I toilet trained late. On June 17th, 1963, the U.S. Supreme Court gave me the best birthday present a 5-year-old kid could ask for. They outlawed prayer in public schools right before I started kindergarten. On November 22nd, 1963, President Kennedy's brains were blown apart on national television. I came in from the yard and saw my mom crying on the couch. What did I do this time? I'd already made her cry once that day. Later, in that same living room, Lee Harvey Oswald was gunned down right before my eyes. And again on the instant replays. The funeral dirge played on, and the flag-draped coffin lingered on the black and white screen day after day as people filed past it to say goodbye. Even I sensed this was a sad, heavy moment. I was upset too. I wondered if cartoons would ever come back. I liked cartoons. Followed at 6 by NBC News. I watched both with equal fascination. My favorite cartoon characters at the time were Bullwinkle and Senator Everett Dirksen. Even then, I was a news hound, alive at a crucial time, alert to what I saw and what my family chose not to hide. If I asked them what a race riot was, they'd tell me. If I asked them, Daddy, what's Vietnam? They'd tell me. But I was terrified of going to Taos, New Mexico over spring vacation. I was afraid I might run into some greasy Mexican Frito Banditos there, with bullet belts and big hats who'd sneer at me as they leaned against what I knew was going to be grimy buildings. They might grab me and run off with me like I'd seen them do on cowboy shows. I was all for Negro civil rights. But when I saw in My Weekly Reader that Native American Indians wanted rights too, I couldn't believe it. How dare they ask for rights after all the trouble they caused on Daniel Boone? I grew up in Boulder, Colorado, about 4 miles from the Rocky Flats nuclear weapons plant. Only time will tell what that did to my brain. In first grade, on the playground, we'd play war. Sometimes even I joined the pack of boys, all chasing one kid called the Jap, all over the playground yelling, "Eh!" A lot of times the Jap was the only Vietnamese kid in our grade. He seemed feisty, not very friendly, and hid in the bushes a lot. I never heard of God till about 3rd grade. The same year I had to stay after school one day and write over and over again, "I will not laugh during flag pledge. I will not laugh during flag pledge." Even my mom's still laughing over that one. At home, my dad would read us Greek, Roman, and Egyptian mythology as bedtime stories, and I had a choice to discover and decide on my own whether or not to believe in gods. That summer, on a family vacation, my dad drove me through the Detroit ghetto to show me up close why people get mad and start riots. It was exciting. We went to a big city, I saw the Henry Ford Car Museum, and I finally got to see some real slums. By the time we got back to my grandparents' place on the other side of Michigan, Detroit was on fire, and my grandparents had a color TV. Vietnam blew up in everyone's face. By 5th or 6th grade, everyone at my school knew who at school was for and against the war. The smiling storybook policeman was now a symbol of violent brutality and hate, especially after my dad came home from a trip saying an LA cop had stuck a shotgun in his belly when he came out to ask why they were blocking the entrance to the place he was trying to run a social work conference at in Santa Barbara, California. He said the cop was shaking as much as he was. Anti-war protests were a regular event across the street from my elementary school at the University of Colorado. Somewhere I still have my souvenir student strike band. I was one of the first kids in my school to have long hair. Paid for it, too. Somewhere around then was when my parents quit buying Coors beer. One night, one of my mother's student employees at the university library showed up at the front door of our house, frightened out of his wits that he was about to get picked up by the cops as a draft dodger and sent to prison. I was the only one home. Then one spring morning, my 6th grade teacher had the gall to start off the class by praising the National Guard for shooting 4 student protesters to death at Kent State. Something inside me snapped. Something inside me said, "This will not stand. This will not stand." Not for me, anyway. Not now, not ever. To rub it in, they forced us to sing almost all patriotic songs in the spring music program that year. I had a weapon, though. I was the worst singer in the class. The one who had to stand up and sing, "And the rocket's red glare," over and over again in front of the entire class, as if humiliating me would somehow get me to sing our national anthem and all those corny Christmas jingles on key. At least I did it my way. In 7th grade geography class, there was a long, detailed unit on Soviet communist propaganda techniques, how their government chose people's careers, how they manipulated the masses through billboard slogans and slanted news reporting that didn't even bother to tell people what they didn't want people to know, how their school books rewrote history, said a Russian invented the light bulb. So then when I got to 8th grade, I thought, I wonder if some of these same propaganda techniques are in the American history books too. And sure enough, they were. Columbus discovered America. Eurocentric land grab speculators and religious fanatics came to visit and decided to stay to make the so-called New World civilized. It was bad enough finding out there wasn't a Santa Claus. Then I found out George Washington owned slaves, that such patriotic heroes as John Hancock and Samuel Adams were by modern definition terrorists, that our country was founded by agribusiness plantation pot growers who didn't feel like paying taxes, if that sounds familiar, that those pilgrims with the Guns N' Roses hats we drew pictures of in elementary school before every Thanksgiving were as wacko as Pat Robertson and later gave us the Salem witch trials. That Father Sarah and the conquistadores and the Yankee cavalry weren't so civilized towards the natives after all. Did a Russian invent the light bulb? How will we ever know? Much later, I got a hold of some old issues of Fortune magazine from 1941, early in the year, long before Pearl Harbor, and it was chock full of state-of-the-art full-page ads from those same global corporations we know and love today, bragging about all the money they were going to make when America entered World War II. Then later I hear that General Motors helped supply both the Allies and the Nazis, then sued the American government after the war for bombing their munitions factory in Dresden, and won. When I was 15, starting high school, I got called into the counselor's office. Eric, it's time for us to sit down and plan your career. What? I'm only 15. What about exploring? What about adventure? What about life? I don't want a career. I hate work. But Eric, look. We have a special hookup to the big computer out at the sprawling IBM factory in scenic Niwot, Colorado. You just tell the computer your skills. Do you have any hobbies, Eric? Tell it what you think you might actually be able to stomach doing the rest of your life in an age when meaningful work is a luxury. And the computer will choose your career for you. Cool. So I tried my sincere best and entered in my life story, my interests. Said I liked theater, broadcasting, forensics, music, all the cool classes that are now getting cut because people are too busy spending their kids' inheritances to pay the taxes to support them. I was good at English, social studies, maybe math. And the computer, as computers did in those days, clinkety, 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 clinked for a while, and eventually spat back that I should spend my high school years preparing to be a dental hygiene assistant. With a life like that to look forward to, I guess I should stick to daydreaming. That great sin of the American education system that I first got yelled at for in 2nd grade, daydreaming of a far-off Walter Mitty Cinderella ambition like starting a band. But that's just a dream, because this is the 1970s. The sober, stupid, boring 70s that only a bonehead would want to bring back any part of in any form. When we were coming of age, we weren't dazed and confused. We were disgusted. We missed the 60s. All that fire mellowed out, paved over into what we now call yuppies. And rock and roll had been reduced to a spectator sport. When the so-called alternative scene that people take for granted today didn't exist. Punk rock didn't exist. Garage bands and independent records were unheard of. In Colorado, you either sounded as horrible as the Eagles or you didn't play. Music was for special people, beautiful people with connections who could all play as good as Jimmy Page. Sometimes people ask me, how can you remember all this stuff? How could I forget? How could anyone forget? It makes me really sad and a little alarmed when someone my age I haven't seen in years tells me that I remember more of their own childhood than they do. That they have no tangible personal memories of Vietnam or even Watergate. We were 16 then. It was on everybody's lips. Senator Sam and those hearings were the best soap opera all summer. But no, sometimes they'll tell me, I don't remember much of anything from back then. I guess I had a bad childhood or something. But then if I start humming a TV commercial no one's heard in decades, bing! They recognize it instantly. That's scary. On my 14th birthday, future sham cult figure G. Gordon Liddy and his CIA renegade friends were caught red-handed in the Watergate apartments, breaking into the Democrats' headquarters in what was supposedly a clean election in what is supposedly a free country. Burned out from fighting against Vietnam or not, people fought back. We were pissed. But did we learn? Did we remember? Contragate is worse, and it's still with us. Government dope dealing, Inslaw, Iraqgate, BCCI. The mask is off again. This time, we embrace the face. I wonder why these things just don't register anymore. A few years ago, I couldn't even get myself kicked out of jury duty by wearing a Millions of Dead Cops t-shirt to court every single day. Nowadays, people are asleep. Nowadays, we've let ourselves be programmed to believe that figure skaters' knees and a Marine's missing weenie are bigger, more important scandals than the $250 billion banking swindle still going on while our rotting neo-banana republic is cracking apart at the seams for all to see. Programmed to believe that everything from immigrants of a different skin color to Snoop Doggy Dogg are more responsible for tearing apart our social fabric than conniving, greedy Republicans. It ain't the fault of the Japanese or even Tanya Harding that our hijacked, unconstitutional government of the people by corporations for corporations must be overthrown. Somewhere out there is what the late folk singer Phil Oakes once called the real America. I agree that there is something in this land, in us, that is worth trying to hang on to. I repeat, the 90s may not be pleasant, but they sure as hell ain't boring. Buy my soda, said the Moose Diarrhea salesman.